And we're back. One Up Gaming, episode four. No, I keep saying 400. It's not, it's 350. I genuinely have to have my phone next to me to see what the last one that I recorded was because numbers are hard.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have a special guest on this time, so please just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ross Brierley. I work at Ghostlight and Laughing Jackel, where I'm the community manager, PR person, tester, and pretty near everything else at the moment. So yeah, I've been there 16, 17 years now, and since the PS2 days. And we primarily do bring Japanese games to the West. We used to develop a few of our own, but now we pretty much just exclusively bring over Japanese games or port them over for other publishers to release in the West.
So you must have seen some weird games that have been over there.
To be honest, most of the strangest games I've worked on have probably been Western games because back in the old days when I first started, we were also Midas Interactive and we released a lot of budget games did a lot of budget games. Some of them were pretty good. Some of them were.
I'm just trying to think, wasn't that like Mr. Mosquito and things like that?
Yes, that was a bit before my time, but yes. And we've also there's a huge range, lots of racers, lots of shooters, lots of puzzle games. There's a strange one we never actually did, which was a sort of match four type thing about octopus balls falling from the sky, and you had to sort of match them. That was fun, but unfortunately, we never actually did it. We got a review copy in to evaluate, but we couldn't actually do it. But I liked that one. Had the most catchy theme song ever as well.
Oh, that's so. How many games would you say you've had your hands in?
It's been a long time since I've sat down and worked it out. But when I last did, I was probably comfortably over 150. So
That's not bad.
yeah, I think that was a few years ago. So it's probably getting near 200 now. But yeah, I've been working at the same company for since the PS2 era. So yeah, there's been a few. The most recent one we did, if I can get a cheap plug in, is Agrest or Generations of War on Switch, which released exactly a month ago, in fact, the 24th of March, which is a return of a game I've worked on several times. We originally did the PS3 game version, which was the last ever PS3 game, but didn't have trophies. A little fact I remember because we had a few people emailing me asking if we could have them, but it wasn't speed. And I also worked on a PC version, so it was kind of like having an old friend back. To the extent, in the second dungeon, when I was walking through, I just suddenly started sort of turning off the main path to where all the chests were without really thinking about it. Just because I was the muscle memory was so strong, I was just, oh yeah, there's a chest here. So yeah.
And I know you've sort of said that you've worked on a lot of varied genres like races, puzzles, RPGs.
Yeah.
Would you say the vast majority would be the RPG at the moment?
And certainly in recent years, yes. Since like probably the later PS3 era, we've primarily worked with Japanese publishers, either releasing their games ourselves, or often uh, more recently doing them for other publishers. We've done a lot of JRPGs, quite a few visual novels, though we've never actually released one ourselves. But it's some it's something we'd be interested in, but the right game has never quite come along for us. But we've been asked to support a lot from people. Some action games. We did the Way of the Samurai games on Steam, although we lost rights to them, so they're now published by someone else. But they're still very cool games. Yeah.
It's a scary world we live in now, especially when a lot of stuff's all like downloadable. And a lot of games, like, well, like let's just say like the Forza games, they only get like a 2-3 year license for the cars. So they can only have the game on sale for like 3 years.
Yeah, in this case, the games are still on sale, but just with the original Japanese publisher controlling the rights to them. So it's their release now.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy working on them.
So
really good character customization.
I'm just having a look in your background. I don't know why, but it looks like Sega Saturn games, but it can't be.
No. It's mainly books, CDs, and a few DVDs. I sort of got my gaming stuff somewhere else.
Yeah.
I'm working from home today, so this is kind of my home. Background, home office / bedroom.
No, it looks pretty cool. I don't know why they do look like Sega Saturn cases to me, but I don't know. Um, so what would you say is your primary gaming system at the minute?
Mainly PC. I primarily play on Steam. I do have access. I do have a PS4. And I do sometimes play on that, but usually Steam. I'd also kind of like to get a Switch, but it hasn't quite happened yet. But it does look a lot. There's a lot of Switch games. I'm like, really fancy playing that. Yeah. So
Which I used to have a Switch, but I sold it. It was basically my what to do when I was bored at the toilet.
yeah, I mean, one of the things I found with handheld consoles is I always end up playing them in the same place. I play my PC games, like set up a desk, except instead of playing with mouse and keyboard, I'm holding the Vita or whatever like this, and just I don't really take them out much.
Yeah, I mean, like I think my Switch, it was literally I had it to work and everything, but it never came out. It was just like when I was sat at home bored.
Yeah,
So it wasn't really a mobile gaming platform. It was just like sat at home.
yeah. I mean, I don't really use portables very, very portably. So, but it's one of those there's enough games on there, but I'm really tempted to Fire Emblem ones, and because the switch, our switch to Japanese games has been really good for me personally because that's the kind of stuff I love. So I've always been into the RPGs and things. So for me, getting to work on more of them has been fantastic. So yeah, that's the sort of game I've been getting a Switch for as well.
I mean, I think for me personally, I've only ever enjoyed one, like what you would consider a JRPG. And that was, I think it was Microsoft's, was it Lost Odyssey?
I've never actually played that one. I've heard really good things about it, but I never had an Xbox. So it's like if I ever got one, that was one of the games I wanted to play, but it wasn't to be.
Yeah, no, Mistwalker did an absolutely fantastic job on that game. It was amazing.
Yeah, I've heard really good things about it.
But I mean, like for me, I don't know about you because like you're UK as well, but like a lot of the so-called mainstream gaming press, they go on massively about Nintendo and their games just because of the history of Nintendo in America, like covering like 98% of sales and everything. So a lot of people, it might be a so-so game, but because of all the history and everything, they just go massively over the top with a lot of the Nintendo sort of games.
I mean, for me personally, I haven't owned a lot of Nintendo consoles in recent years. I had a Wii. Before that, my first console was an NES, so I sort of was a Nintendo child growing up. And I think they do fantastic games, but like they have certain styles that they're very, very good at. And outside, and for me, that's pretty good. I love the Fire Emblem series. I enjoy platformers, so their platforming games are good. Mario Kart's always a great laugh when you've got some mates round. So for me, they really work. But obviously, the thing about video games these days, I mean, even more so, it's always been like that, but even more these days, there's such a wide variety of things that no one publisher or console manufacturer is going to satisfy everyone's sort of preferences. And I think Nintendo what quite clearly sort of understand what your average Nintendo fan wants, what sort of person who buys a Switch wants, and are very good at homing in and creating games for that market. They're very creative within that space. Obviously, if you don't quite fall into that category, it's not going to work for you very well.
I mean, I do think it's funny because like we've had a couple of people on our team who have been American, and when I mentioned to them that the Master System outsold the NES 4-1 in the UK, they're absolutely flabbergasted.
I mean, it's one of the things about being in an English speaking country that American history, particularly in the gaming space, sort of kind of overwrites UK gaming history unless you're really into it. Like, it's things like the talk of the gaming crash that happened about the Atari, which
Yeah, the
wasn't really a
1983
thing here.
crash. It never happened here because we had like the Spectrum, the
Yeah,
C64, we had all these other things happening.
yeah. So you don't quite have the same history of Nintendo coming into a field that was not quite in ruins, but have very much seen better days and reviving it here. It was, I say, I was an NES kid growing up, so I was a Nintendo kid, but there's a huge variety of things people have. I knew a lot of kids, people with Segas. I knew people with Spectrums, with Amigas. So yeah, well, you had a much bigger variety here than you had in the States, I think, in that period.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know if you can see or not, but I've got like a stupid Sega Saturn tattoo on my hand.
Yeah,
That was my favorite game back in when Sega was doing the early like Model 2 sort of arcade games.
yeah,
Like Virtua Fighter 2 is one of my favorites, Virtua Cop,
yeah,
Sega Rally, all these like fast-paced arcade sort of games I used to love.
yeah.
Um, and I mean, I come from a generation where I like to have a little bit of anything. I can't sit down and play one game for like 20 hours. I'll play something for half an hour, then turn it off.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting to the point now where I don't have as much time to play video games as I used to, which means in practice, if I play an RPG, I've usually got sort of two games on the go. I've got an RPG which I'll sort of have ongoing, and that will take like a month or something for me to finish. And then I'll have, a little thing, maybe a platformer or a sports game that I'm sort of playing just for sort of for a bit of variety during that period. But just, I mean, I guess that's the thing about what, working and all that. You don't have the time you used to breeze through a sort of 60, 70 hour RPG in like a few weeks.
No, I mean, I don't think I've ever. It's like that Lost Odyssey. I think it was on 4 DVD discs,
Yeah.
and I don't think I got off the first disc.
Yeah. I mean, weirdly, I used to be terrible at finishing games when I was younger. Like I never used to finish anything that's particularly long. Whereas these days, sort of, I guess 10, I don't know, but I've got a lot better at sort of finishing games. Like I think the first Final Fantasy game I ever actually finished was Final Fantasy 13. All the others I sort of played and got quite far into, and then drifted off into another game. So that was the first one I actually sort of sat down and finished. And that was probably around the period where I got better at finishing RPGs.
Wasn't 13 meant to be the bad one?
I wouldn't say it's bad. It's not quite as good as some of the others. It's not as good as. I mean, my favourites were like 7, 9. I really liked 9. 12 was pretty cool as well. 13, I don't think was quite on the same level as. Oh, for me anyway, wasn't quite on the same level as those three. It was. I mean, I still enjoyed it. I finished it, and if I hadn't enjoyed it, I probably wouldn't. But I think I prefer the sort of the few ones slightly earlier in the series. That's
Yeah, I mean,
probably
I guess
probably
I
my
don't
sort of.
like the random battle encounters.
I mean, yeah, I think that's probably my sort of Final Fantasy Golden Age. But then at the same time, how much of that is I was younger and you always look back fondly at things that came out when you were like, I I must have been like in my teens when Final Fantasy VII came out. It's kind of hard for a game that comes out in the same series when you're an adult to compete with your memories from that era.
I think I'd have been about 18, 19 when Final Fantasy 7 came out.
Yeah, I'm trying. I can't really remember when it was, but um,
Was it
just
98?
yeah. So I'd been about 14, 15 then. So for a game to come out, yeah, when you play a game quite a lot when you're 14 and 15, it's going to be very hard for a game you play a lot like 10, 12 years later to sort of compare the two because you're always going to have very fond memories of that sort of period.
So, what did you make of the Final Fantasy 7 remake that they did?
I think it's really interesting. Like, obviously, there was some expectation, certainly on my part, there would be a lot closer to the original Final Fantasy VII than it ended up being. But in a way, I think it's quite an interesting and brave idea to just sort of take it in a very different direction than the original Final Fantasy VII went in. Because as I've sort of mentioned, you probably can't compete with my hazy memories of sort of 15 and 16, putting it on the PS1 and no, yeah, it was PS1, and I hadn't played a JRPG before that, so it formed a lot of my opinions of what a JRPG is.